For many decades, the story of India Inc. was the story of the Tata-Birla families. And at a time when the entire nation mourns the passing of the legendary Ratan Tata, to reminisce about the life and times of this larger-than-life industrialist, we're joined live and exclusive on the India Today network at this time by Kumar Mangalam Birla, chairperson of the Aditya Birla Group. Thank you very much, Mr. Birla, for taking out time on a day when all of India seems to be in mourning. There's such an outpouring of grief and emotion, not just from politicians, from industrialists, but even from the Aam Aadmi. You knew Mr. Tata at very close quarters. Can you give us a sense of what is it that you think made him so special? The country seems to be in mourning. It's almost as if everyone had some connect with Mr. Tata. What is it that you think made him strike such a direct chord with so many people?
So Rahul, let me start by saying that our families have been friends for more than a couple of generations. So it does feel like a personal loss for sure. My father and he in particular were very close friends. He called me the day after my father passed and said, you have a friend at the end of a telephone line in me and you can call me anytime. I can't forget that he stood behind me all through my father's funeral, that too wearing a suit. He was pretty drenched by the end of it all. I think his biggest legacy goes beyond this industry. His footprint, as we know, extends beyond this industry. He impacted India in a very real way. I think his legacy as a humanitarian and as a philanthropist will actually be larger than his legacy as an industrialist, which in itself has been very large and very profound. I knew him from very close quarters. I saw him as, in the role of a partner. I saw him as a member of his board. I was on the board of Tata Steel and have a lot of very interesting memories, rich memories. I remember I was on the board of Tata Steel when the Tatas were going through a transition. You still had, veterans from the group being wheeled into the boardroom in wheelchairs. And I could see his extreme discomfort. He also had spoken to me about it, but he was always very courteous, very polite. And that was a man, very simple, led a very frugal life. From what I know, he lived in a very simple home, uh, hardly had two or three domestic staff at home, despite the fact that he was aging and needed help. The only luxury he allowed himself were, I think, he spent on clothes and shirts and suits. Nothing really beyond that. So he was truly a humanitarian. I think he run the Tata Group truly like a trustee of shareholders and of the people. His involvement with some of the Tata charities was quite deep. Um, of course, he was very low profile, shunned publicity, stayed away from the limelight. I guess you guys know that better than anyone else. So, a giant of a man, he leaves a legacy and a life that I think we should all celebrate.
Sir, the relationship of competition and cooperation between the Tata and Birla groups goes back decades. In fact, in 1944, J.R.D. Tata and G.D. Birla ji together played an important role in the formation of the Bombay Plan. Can you give our viewers at this time a sense of the history of cooperation and at times competition between the Birla and the Tata groups, and how you were able to maintain these personal equations despite the fact that in industries like cement, steel, your companies were at loggerheads and in competition?
There never was any sense of competition, to be honest, Rahul. Never felt that. I think one would say that the two groups have been like siblings almost, with their fortunes inextricably linked with each other. The only common industry, frankly, was telecom, where we were partners for a while. Um, I don't think there was any sense of competition. My great grandfather, G.D. Birla, and JRD were very close. There was a point in time when we as a family held more shares in the Tata companies um, than the Tatas themselves. And I remember my great grandfather used to send the proxies to JRD before the AGMs of his companies. Both of them were architects of India and Indian industry post independence. Very alike in the way that they conducted themselves and their vision for the country. So I think that we have bonds between our families that go back a long time. And I see a great resemblance in the culture and values shared between the two families and the two groups.
So one is trying to build the India story, the other is trying to take the India story internationally. In the international acquisitions that Mr. Tata made of Land Rover, Jaguar, etc. Do you want to tell us what you learned by observing Mr. Tata serving on the boards, by observing him in action? What were the reflections that you tried to pick up by seeing this legend in action?
I think he was very bold in the decisions that he took, especially with uh, JLR and with Steel. He had a style where he let these foreign acquisitions kind of remain at a distance and not really integrate them along with the mother companies. That was a style that was quite typical of his. I really don't know why he chose to do that. Maybe he just thought that was the more practical thing to do. Once he decided that he wanted to acquire something, whether in India or overseas, he would go after it and almost acquire it at any cost. But he was passionate. He was passionate about Tata Motors for sure. I think Chorus um, gave him a lot of trouble, but he was quite passionate about it when he made the acquisition. And as you know, he paid a very handsome premium for it. So I think he believed that Indian industry had it in him to go global. And that was reflected in his decisions to make overseas acquisitions.
What do you think a young entrepreneur, someone with a startup, somebody hoping to build some company, should learn from the manner in which Mr. Tata conducted himself at a time when we see so much display of wealth or ostentation? What do you think are the biggest lessons young people can learn from the life and times of Mr. Tata?
I think that he always had a larger purpose. In his case, it was the purpose what was to build India as a nation, whether through his industries or through his charities, of which there were many and very deep, impacting ones. I think that the takeaway for me, and I would guess for young entrepreneurs, would be that it's important to have a larger purpose that goes just beyond the P&L and assets that you create. I think it is the larger purpose that drives you to do things that are beyond the ordinary and really make a difference.
What do you think of the mental makeup of a person who goes against the advice of professionals around him who suggest against spending money on building a nano car or an Indica, saying that this may not work, or even the purchase of Air India, which is a very difficult acquisition, the group still trying to figure out how to bring it together and make it financially viable, and yet he's determined by a larger purpose of connecting with the Aam Aadmi, providing him with a cheap car, that he's determined to go out and make it no matter how much it costs or what it takes to get it done.
Well, I know that in the case of Air India, it was probably an emotional decision for him. He was extremely close to JRD, who he called Jay. He talked often about his relationship with JRD. He considered him his mentor. So I can see the emotion behind getting the Air India brand and the Air India, the company, into the Tata fold. I'm not sure he really listened to anyone once he had made up his mind about something. I think that, he was a man of his own conviction. Once he'd made up his mind, for example, um, that he wanted to launch something like the Indica, he would do it. And he would, he was pretty hedonistic in some ways, jokingly, about going ahead with the projects that he held close to his heart. Um, I must say, in a very determined way.
So the other thing that conjoins the two groups is the emphasis on philanthropy. both the Birla Group and the Tata Group place so much emphasis on different aspects of philanthropy, of the efforts that was made by Mr. Tata. What stood out to you, and what do you think is a lesson that other groups in similar positions to try and give back to society can potentially learn from?
I was with a close relative at the Tata Cancer Hospital in Calcutta a few years ago. Uh, that was the first time I was going there, and I was hearing about stories from them about the involvement of Mr. Tata, and I was quite moved to know that his involvement was so deep. He didn't really talk about them, and I must say that our family also doesn't like talking about the charities that we do. Um, it's been a few generations of charity in different ways, but we ourselves don't know much about it. We hear about it, but really don't know. It's not documented anywhere, nor does the family, care about really documenting it. And I find that there's is a very similar story. I think that they rarely speak about their contributions to society. Their institutions, of course, speak for themselves, whether it's Tata Cancer Hospital or it's TISS. I've never seen him or seen an interview of his or read an interview where he talks about the charities that they do. I think he's always been very quiet about it.
So one of the things that Mr. Tata grappled with was the issue of succession, where he attempted something that didn't work out. How do you look at the aspect of business continuity in the absence of this larger than life figure, the future of Tata Trust, Tata Sons, and the various Tata Group companies? How do you, looking from the outside, assess that?
I don't have any insight on this, Rahul, so it may not be correct for me to comment, but I think that he leaves behind a set of companies, industries that are very robust. Um, and I think that, they're self-sustaining, they are all institutions in themselves. Um, I think whoever takes over, I mean, if there is such a plan, I don't know if there is, I think we inherit a great legacy and assets that an inheritor would should be really proud about. I'm sure that will unfold in the next few days.
Finally, sir, before I wrap up, any personal story, memory of your times with Mr. Tata that comes to your mind? You'd gone to the NCPA this morning, so when you were there, when you're seeing people around you, what are the stories about Mr. Tata that were flashing in your mind?
Lots of them actually, and like I said, I was fortunate to have spent a fair amount of time with him. He was a very honest and a candid guy. I remember one instance where we were sitting together in a public function, and he looked very uncomfortable. And I asked him if he was unwell because he just looked, extremely like he was, in some kind of pain almost. He said, "I'm very nervous." I said, "For what?" He said, "I have to go and speak in front of 1,000 people." I said, "But you must have done this a zillion times over." He said, "That's true, but I'm still very nervous. It makes me very nervous." I happened to mumble something like, "Yeah, I'm nervous too." And he said, "I don't think that's true. That's true. You don't look nervous. And I have never seen you look nervous before addressing a gathering. But it's one of my worst fears to face an audience." So, he was vulnerable and sort of spoke about his vulnerabilities often, which made him so much more endearing.
Mr. Birla, for sharing your memories and reflections on the life and times of Mr. Ratan Tata. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate you making this effort to join us. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Aaron.